What if I told you there's a verse in the Bible that can resolve all your internal conflicts, end your confusion about relationships, and give you total clarity about the most important decisions in your life? Genesis 1:4 contains a secret that most people spend their entire lives without discovering. And when you understand what God really did when He separated light from darkness, you'll have a powerful tool to transform any chaotic area of your life. Get ready, because this is going to change everything. In our last video, we saw how God said, "Let there be light," and instantly light appeared. But now we come to something even deeper. Genesis 1:4 says, "And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness." Wait a minute. Why did God need to separate light from darkness? Why couldn't they coexist? And why is this so important for your life today? The answer will revolutionize how you make decisions. Here's something that's going to blow your mind. When God created light, darkness didn't automatically disappear. It was still there, and this created a problem that required specific divine action: separation. Think about this. God, who is all-powerful, could have simply eliminated all darkness. But He chose to do something different. He chose to separate. And this choice reveals a fundamental principle about how God operates and how you should operate in your life. When God separated light from darkness, He was establishing the first principle of divine order. He was showing that some things simply cannot coexist. Some things need to be kept separate for life to function properly, and this applies directly to your life today. Maybe you're trying to mix things that God never intended to be mixed. Maybe you're trying to maintain toxic relationships alongside healthy relationships. Maybe you're trying to combine destructive habits with constructive habits. Maybe you're trying to mix worldly values with biblical values. Now pay attention to this crucial detail. The text says, "And God saw the light, that it was good." This means God evaluated. God made a judgment. God exercised discernment. And here's the truth that can transform your life. If God Himself needed to stop and evaluate what was good, how much more do you need to do this in your life? If the Creator of the universe exercised discernment, why do you think you can live without discernment? Many people over 40 are suffering because they never learned to make this evaluation that God made. They never stopped to ask, "Is this good for my life or not?" They never developed the ability to distinguish between what builds and what destroys. God saw that light was good. But notice He didn't say darkness was good. He didn't try to find positive aspects in darkness. He didn't try to balance light and darkness. He simply recognized light equals good, darkness needs to be separated. And this is revolutionary for your relationships. You need to stop trying to find the good side in people who consistently bring darkness into your life. You need to stop trying to balance toxic influences with positive influences. Just like God, you need to learn to identify what is good and separate what is not. When God made separation between light and darkness, He wasn't being cruel or exclusive. He was being wise. He understood something fundamental. For life to prosper, certain things needed to be kept distinct, and this principle of separation is one of the most powerful tools you can apply in your life. Let me give you practical examples. In relationships, you need to separate relationships that elevate you from relationships that bring you down. You need to separate people who support you from people who sabotage you. You need to separate those who celebrate your success from those who envy your progress. In habits, you need to separate activities that strengthen you from activities that weaken you. You need to separate what brings you closer to your goals from what takes you away from them. You need to separate what feeds your soul from what drains your energy. In thoughts, you need to separate thoughts that build you up from thoughts that tear you down. You need to separate truths from lies. You need to separate faith from fear. In finances, you need to separate necessary expenses from impulsive spending. You need to separate wise investments from risky investments. You need to separate real abundance from empty consumerism. God didn't mix light with darkness because he knew this would create confusion and chaos. And when you try to mix what should be separated in your life, you create the same result: confusion and chaos. Now I'm going to teach you how to apply this principle from Genesis 1:4 practically in your life. It's a three-step process that will transform your decision-making. First step, evaluate like God did. Stop and ask, is this good for my life? Don't ask if it's easy, if it's popular, if it's convenient. Ask if it's good. God saw that light was good. You need to develop this same capacity for evaluation. Second step, identify what needs to be separated. Once you've identified what is good, you automatically identify what is not good, and what is not good needs to be separated. Not minimized, not tolerated, not balanced, separated. Third step, execute the separation with authority. God didn't hesitate, he divided, he acted. You also need to act. You need to have the courage to separate what needs to be separated, even if it's difficult, even if it's painful. Let me give you a personal example. There was a moment in my life when I realized that some friendships were consistently bringing me down. For years, I tried to balance these negative influences with positive influences. But when I understood Genesis 1:4, I realized that God didn't try to balance light and darkness. He separated them. When you start applying this principle from Genesis 1:4 in your life, incredible things begin to happen. First, your mind becomes clearer. When you stop trying to mix what shouldn't be mixed, confusion disappears and clarity emerges. Second, your decisions become easier. When you have clear criteria for what is good and what needs to be separated, decisions become obvious. Third, your energy increases. When you stop wasting energy trying to make things work that shouldn't work together, you have more energy to invest in what really matters. Fourth, your relationships improve. When you invest time only in relationships that are good according to God's criteria, those relationships flourish. Fifth, your purpose becomes clearer. When you separate what is aligned with your mission from what is misaligned, your purpose becomes crystal clear. But let me warn you, applying this principle isn't always easy. Some people will question your decisions. Some people will accuse you of being extreme or inflexible. But remember, if God, who is love, chose to separate light from darkness, then separation isn't lack of love, it's wisdom. Genesis 1:4 teaches us that separation isn't destructive division, it's divine organization. When God separated light from darkness, he wasn't being cruel, he was being wise. And when you apply this same principle in your life, you're not being rigid, you're being intelligent. If you're over 40, you've probably already learned that life is too short to waste time on what isn't good. You've already understood that you can't give the same attention to everything and everyone. It's time to apply the wisdom of Genesis 1:4 and make the necessary separations. What area of your life needs divine separation? What relationship? What habit? What thought, what commitment is mixing light with darkness and creating confusion in your life? If this message touched your heart, if you can see where you need to apply the principle of divine separation, I want you to do 4 important things. First, subscribe to this channel and hit the bell, because we're walking verse by verse through God's Word, discovering practical principles that transform real lives. Second, leave a comment telling me what area of your life needs divine separation. Be brave. Be specific. Our community here will pray for you and encourage you in this process. Third, share this video with someone who is living in confusion because they're trying to mix things that should be separated. It could be that friend who's in a toxic relationship, that family member who's stuck in destructive habits, that colleague who can't make clear decisions. They need to understand the power of divine separation. And fourth, prepare for tomorrow, because we're going to discover what happened after the separation. We'll explore Genesis 1:5, where God established time, created cycles, and defined temporal order. We'll learn how God organizes time and how you can apply this to organize your schedule, your priorities, and your future. Remember, just as God saw that light was good and separated it from darkness, you need to identify what is good in your life and have the courage to separate what is not. Your life will thank you, your relationships will flourish, and your future will shine brighter. May God give you wisdom to make the necessary separations, and see you tomorrow for another transformative revelation from God's Word.